The Galactic Federation's yearly fighting contest was the biggest event across the stars. Beings from 17 galaxies came to show off their fighting skills, advanced weapons, and battle smarts. This year was special because Earth was invited to join for the first time. Alan Carter stood straight as the large lizard-like draconian ambassador looked down at him with a sneer. The alien scales shined under the bright lights of the space station near Jupiter, where the Earth team had gathered. "Your kind has barely learned to travel in space," Ambassador Kragthal said, his mouth parts clicking as he tried not to laugh. "What could you possibly bring to our grand contest?" Alan stayed calm, though inside he was angry. At 35, he had spent 15 years in elite military units before being chosen to represent Earth's armed forces. "We learn fast, Ambassador." Susan Wright, the leader of the Earth team, stepped forward. Her face showed no feeling as she spoke to the group of alien officials and fighters. "The United Nations Space Command thanks you for the invitation. We are eager to show what humans can do." Laughter spread through the aliens, the jelly-like Quarians, the rock-based lithoids, and the hive-minded Vespula. Even the usually serious Andorians joined in making fun of the humans. "Your simple bullet weapons will not help you much," said General Zor from the Centaurian Empire, crossing all four of his arms. "Your fighting skills have never been tested against better life forms." Susan kept her polite smile. "We have picked our best fighters from Earth's many fighting styles. I think you will find them surprising." What the aliens didn't know was that Earth had a secret weapon. While most of the team was made up of military people, intelligence agencies had insisted on including one special person, a shadow fighter whose training went beyond normal warfare. On the viewing deck of the Yayoi transport ship, a lone figure watched the meeting. Joe Nakamura, from a long line of ninja warriors, observed without showing any emotion. His family had kept the ancient arts alive for hundreds of years, adapting them to modern war while keeping their core ideas. Now, those skills would be tested against the galaxy's greatest fighters. As the Earth team boarded the huge contest ship, Joe stayed apart from the others. His job wasn't just to compete, it was to understand these alien fighting styles, adapt to them, and prove that humanity's old traditions could stand up against technology thousands of years more advanced than Earth's. The contest would start in 3 days. Earth had much to get ready for and even more to prove. After the meeting with the alien officials, Susan gathered the Earth team in their assigned quarters. The room was designed for human comfort, with Earth normal gravity and air, but everything else reminded them they were far from home. "They think we're weak," Susan said, looking at each team member. "They think we're primitive. Let them." Alan paced the room, still angry from the ambassador's words. "Did you see their weapons, their armor? Some of them don't even need weapons, their bodies are naturally armed." "Technology isn't everything," Susan reminded him. "We've prepared for this. Each of you was chosen because you represent the best of Earth's fighting traditions." The team consisted of 12 members, 3 military special forces, 2 Olympic athletes, 4 weapons experts, 2 tactical planners, and Joe. While the others talked strategy, Joe sat by the viewing window, watching stars he had never seen before. Patricia Ross, Earth's top weapons expert, approached him. At 42, she had designed combat systems used by militaries around the world. "You're the wild card, aren't you?" she said, sitting beside him. "The one they don't expect." Joe nodded slightly. "My grandfather used to say that the best advantage is to be underestimated." "Well, we've certainly achieved that," Patricia said with a dry laugh. "They think we're a joke." "Good," Joe replied. "Laughter blinds them to what we really are." Over. The next 3 days, the Earth team studied videos of past tournaments. They watched alien fighting styles, analyzed strengths and weaknesses, and prepared as best they could. The aliens had allowed Earth access to these records, perhaps thinking it would intimidate them. Instead, it gave them valuable information. Joe spent hours in meditation, preparing his mind for what was to come. While the others relied on equipment and group tactics, his approach was different. The ninja tradition wasn't about brute force or fancy technology. It was about perception, adaptation, and using an opponent's strength against them. On the eve of the tournament, Susan called Joe to her private quarters. "The others don't fully understand why you're here," she said. "They respect your skills, but they don't see how ancient fighting arts can stand against alien technology." "They don't need to understand," Joe said quietly. "Only our opponents need to learn that lesson." Susan studied him. "The intelligence agencies insisted you be included. They said your family has been preparing for this moment for generations, though no one could have predicted first contact would happen in our lifetime." Joe nodded. "My ancestors believed that true combat transcends time and place. The principles remain the same, whether fighting a samurai with a sword or an alien with energy weapons. Understand yourself, understand your opponent, find the balance between and use it." "Well," Susan said, "you'll get your chance to test that theory. The committee has announced the match lineup. The others will compete first, but you're scheduled for the 4th day. They've paired you against an Andorian champion." "Good," Joe said. "The Andorians rely on neural implants and predictive algorithms. They've forgotten the value of instinct." Susan looked skeptical but nodded. "Get some rest. Tomorrow it begins." As Susan left, Joe returned to the viewing window. Somewhere out there, across 17 galaxies, countless civilizations were watching, waiting to see what Earth could do. They expected failure. They expected entertainment at humanity's expense. Joe would show them something else entirely. Not just skill or strength, but something many of these advanced species had lost along their path to the stars. The warrior spirit that technology could enhance but never replace. The tournament would begin in the morning. Earth was ready to surprise the galaxy. The tournament arena looked like a huge round stadium that could change to copy different places. For the first matches, it was made to look like a rocky, empty moon with low gravity and thin air. All fighters wore special suits that let them breathe while still being able to move normally. Lieutenant Alan Carter was the first human to fight. He faced a Proximan warrior, an alien with 4 arms and skin like black polished stone. The fight was rough and short. Alan's military training was not enough against the alien's greater strength and extra arms. He only lasted 3 minutes before he was defeated. "Just as we expected," General Zor said from the viewing area. "Humans don't have the physical traits needed for real combat excellence." Captain Susan Wright kept her face calm, but inside she was worried. Their performance so far had only made the aliens more sure that humans were weak. The next day, Dr. Patricia Ross, Earth's best weapons expert, fought against a Vespula drone. Her advanced fighting suit, the best technology Earth could make, gave her an advantage at first. However, the hive-minded creature adapted quickly, finding weak points in the suit's movement systems. The match ended with Patricia losing, though. She lasted nearly 15 minutes, much better than Alan had done. "Your technology is cute," Ambassador Cragthal told Susan afterward. "Maybe in a few hundred years you might create something worth using." By the 3rd day, Earth had lost 5 matches with no wins. The mood among the human team was getting worse. That evening, they gathered in their rooms to think about a new plan. "We are outmatched in physical strength and technology," Alan admitted, nursing his injuries. "But we haven't shown everything we can do yet." Susan nodded, turning to Joe Nakamura, who had been quiet throughout all the events. "It's time." Joe had been watching every match, studying how the aliens moved, how fast they reacted, and how they planned their attacks. Unlike the other humans, he didn't rely on technology or standard military training. His family's techniques had grown over hundreds of years to focus on one main idea: adapting to beat stronger opponents. "Tomorrow I fight the Andorian champion," Joe said quietly. "They use prediction computers to guess their opponent's moves. Their brain implants make them react 4 times faster than a normal human." "How do you beat that?" asked Patricia, really wanting to know. Joe allowed himself a small smile. "You become unpredictable. You move in ways their computers cannot guess." That night, while the others slept, Joe meditated in the zero-gravity room, practicing movements that went against normal physics and logic, techniques that had been perfected on Earth for beating opponents who could see your attacks coming. Story Next morning, the tournament announcer called for Earth's fighter to enter the arena. The alien spectators leaned forward, expecting another quick and funny defeat for the primitive humans. What they saw instead left them confused and amazed. The arena had been changed to look like an old forest, with huge tree trunks providing cover in different levels of ground. The air was thick and damp, with fog limiting how far anyone could see. It was a place designed to help the Andorian champion, Zeltor, whose species evolved in similar conditions. Joe Nakamura entered wearing only a light environmental suit with no weapons or armor. The difference between him and his heavily enhanced opponent was striking. "The human chooses to die with dignity," commented one of the lithoid observers. "Admirable, if foolish." The match began, and Zeltor immediately turned on his special vision, scanning the fog for heat signals. Finding Joe's position, he launched himself forward with amazing speed, 4 hands ready to deliver a paralyzing nerve strike. But Joe wasn't there. Confused, Zeltor spun around, his brain implants struggling to track the human's movement pattern. Joe seemed to flow like water, never where the Andorians' prediction computers expected him to be. In the viewing area, Captain Susan Wright watched with quiet satisfaction as the alien spectators fell silent. General Zor leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowed in concentration. "What kind of technology is your warrior using?" he demanded. "No technology," Susan replied. "Just training." Below, Joe continued his elusive dance. When he finally struck, it was with precision rather than power. His fingers found pressure points that the Andorian's body shared with humans, temporarily disrupting nerve pathways and causing one of Zeltor's arms to go limp. The Andorian roared in frustration, deploying wrist-mounted sound weapons. The sound waves should have confused any opponent, but Joe had already prepared for this, putting special material in his ears before the match. He continued his attack, using the environment to his advantage, leading the increasingly frustrated Andorian into traps of his own making. "Impossible," whispered Ambassador Cragthal. "The human is predicting moves before Zeltor's neural computer can calculate them." 15 minutes into the match, Joe had systematically disabled 3 of the Andorian's 4 arms and disrupted his balance center. The final move came when Zeltor, desperate and angry, charged forward with full power. Joe seemed to disappear into the fog, only to reappear behind his opponent. A precisely delivered strike to a bunch of nerves at the base of the Andorian's skull knocked him unconscious. The arena fell silent. Then, one of the Quarian delegates began a slow, rhythmic pulsation that was their version of applause. Others joined in, the sound growing as they realized what they had just seen. "Victory to Earth," the tournament official announced, sounding stunned. As Joe walked calmly from the arena, the alien delegations erupted in a storm of questions and demands for explanation. How had a species with such primitive technology produced a warrior capable of defeating one of the galaxy's elite fighters? In the human quarters, Alan greeted Joe with newfound respect. "How did you do that?" Joe removed the special earplugs and took a drink of water. "The Andorians rely too much on their technology. They've forgotten that combat is also mental. Their prediction computers work against opponents who think like machines." "And you don't," Susan said with a nod of understanding. "I was trained to empty my mind, to act without showing my intentions, to move without patterns," Joe explained. "My ancestors developed these techniques to fight opponents who could read body language and guess standard attacks. The principles work just as well against alien neural computers." Word of the human victory spread quickly through the tournament ship. Suddenly, Earth's team was no longer ignored or mocked. They were studied, analyzed, feared, and Joe Nakamura had 6 more matches to fight. The tournament committee quickly changed the match schedule, moving Joe Nakamura up to face tougher opponents. This had never happened before, a first-time participant advancing so fast, but the alien viewers demanded it. They wanted to see if the human's victory was luck or something more important. Joe's next opponent was a lithoid warrior, a being made of living crystal whose body could not be hurt by most physical attacks. The arena was set up as a volcanic landscape with rivers of hot lava and unstable ground. How do you fight something you can't hurt? Alan asked as Joe got ready. By understanding that hurting isn't always the goal, Joe replied. You can win, in ways other than causing damage. The match proved his point. Instead of trying to break the unbreakable, Joe used the environment, leading the heavy crystal being onto weak surfaces that gave way under its weight. When the lithoid partially sank in lava, the extreme temperature difference caused small cracks in its crystal structure, temporarily freezing it in place. That was victory number 2 for Earth. The following day, Joe faced a Vespula Queen, a tactical genius who controlled multiple drone bodies at the same time. The arena became a maze-like hive structure with countless identical hallways and rooms. She'll coordinate her drones to surround you, Patricia warned. You'll be fighting 6 opponents at once. Joe nodded. Then I'll need to find the queen. The match lasted nearly an hour. With Joe systematically eliminating drone bodies while avoiding capture, he studied their movement patterns, noticing subtle differences in how they responded to his actions. Eventually, he identified which drone was receiving commands first and followed it back to the queen's chamber. Rather than attacking her directly, he used smoke bombs from his limited equipment allowance to disrupt the smells she used to control her drones. The third victory stunned the Galactic community. As Joe's reputation grew, so did the scrutiny. Several delegations formally complained, accusing Earth of sending an enhanced warrior rather than a natural human. Medical scans were ordered, revealing nothing but a standard human body with unusually developed brain pathways, the result of decades of specialized training, not technological enhancement. Your warrior is unusual, General Zor told Susan privately after the 4th match, which Joe won against a Centaurian weapons master. He cannot represent the typical abilities of your species. You're right, Susan admitted. But that's our point. Humanity doesn't advance by making everyone the same. We specialize. Joe represents one path of human development, the refinement of ancient traditions rather than dependence on external technology. The tournament's semi-final match would pit Joe against the defending champion, a draconian royal guard named Vex-Kor, undefeated for 3 tournament cycles. Ambassador Kregthal personally visited the human quarters the night before. Your ninja has impressed many, the ambassador said, using the Earth term that had quickly spread throughout the tournament ship. But tomorrow he faces true power. Vex-Kor has killed 17 opponents who refused to give up. Joe met the ambassador's gaze calmly. Thank you for the warning. After the draconian left, Susan turned to Joe with concern. You've proven your point. No one's mocking Earth now. If this Vex-Kor is as dangerous as they say, I didn't come here just to avoid mockery, Joe interrupted gently. I came to learn and to teach. There's one more lesson these galactic warriors need to understand about humanity. What's that? Alan asked. Joe began his pre-match meditation. That we never stop adapting. The next morning, the entire human delegation gathered in Joe's preparation room. Each offered words of encouragement or advice based on their specialties. His scales are thickest on his back and chest, Patricia said, showing Joe a scan of draconian anatomy. The joints where the limbs connect to the torso are more vulnerable, Alan added. He's won all his matches with overwhelming force in the first minute. If you can survive that initial attack, he might get frustrated. Joe listened to each of them, taking in their observations while remaining centered. Thank you all, he said finally. But remember, the goal isn't just to win. It's to show them something they've never seen before. Susan placed a hand on his shoulder. Earth is watching, Joe. The first transmissions of your matches reached home yesterday. You've already become a symbol. Joe nodded. Then let's give them something worth seeing. The arena for the semifinal match was announced. A mountainous terrain with rapidly changing weather conditions. The gravity would shift randomly, and visibility would be affected by sudden storms. It was designed to test adaptability, the very quality Joe had been demonstrating. As Joe entered the preparation chamber adjacent to the arena, he found a Quarian delegate waiting for him. The gelatinous being pulsed with colorful light patterns that the translator rendered as speech. Human ninja, it communicated. My species believes in balance. The draconian you face today has never known defeat. His arrogance distorts the harmony of the tournament. Joe waited, sensing there was more. I have observed your methods, the Quarian continued. You do not seek to dominate through force, but to redirect and harmonize. This aligns with my species' philosophy. Thank you, Joe said, uncertain why the alien had sought him out. I am not permitted to assist you directly, the Quarian pulsed, but I can share an observation. Draconians evolved in environments with intense electrical storms. Their nervous systems are highly resistant to electrical overload, but extraordinarily sensitive to disruptions in electromagnetic fields. With that cryptic information, the Quarian departed, leaving Joe to complete his preparations. Minutes later, Joe stepped into the arena to face Vexicor. The draconian champion towered over him, nearly twice his height and 4 times his weight. Armor plates covered his vital areas, and his claws gleamed with a metallic enhancement that could slice through standard body armor. Small human, Vexicor rumbled, his translator making his words sound even more menacing. I will make your defeat quick if you submit now. Joe simply bowed, a traditional sign of respect before combat that confused the draconian. From the observation deck, alien dignitaries and the human delegation watched intently. Ambassador Kragthal leaned toward Susan. Your warrior shows courage, facing certain defeat with such calm. Susan smiled slightly. You still don't understand humans, Ambassador. That's not resignation you're seeing. It's focus. The match signal sounded, and Vexicor charged forward with frightening speed, his massive form somehow graceful despite its bulk. Joe stood perfectly still until the last possible moment, then moved, not away, but toward the charging draconian, sliding under, his guardian past him. Vexicor skidded to a halt, surprised by the human's speed and unusual tactic. He spun around, eyes narrowing. You cannot evade me forever, human. Joe remained silent, his stance relaxed but ready. He remembered the Quarian's hint about electromagnetic sensitivity, noting the metallic components in Vexicor's armor and weapons. A plan began to form. The battle continued, with Joe avoiding direct confrontation while studying his opponent's movements. Each time Vexicor attacked, Joe redirected the force, never meeting it head-on. The draconian's frustration grew with each failed attempt to land a decisive blow. As Joe led Vexicor higher into the mountainous terrain, the weather systems began to shift. Dark clouds gathered, and the distant rumble of thunder echoed through the arena. Joe smiled inwardly. The environment was about to become his greatest ally. Thunder boomed across the arena as dark clouds gathered overhead. Joe led Vexicor higher into the mountains, watching as lightning flashed between peaks. The draconian champion followed, growing more angry with each step. Stand and fight, human, Vexicor roared, his voice competing with the thunder. Your cowardice dishonors your species. Joe said nothing, saving his breath for the task ahead. The Quarian's hint about draconians being sensitive to electromagnetic disruptions was key to his plan. He needed to reach the highest peak before the storm fully arrived. In the observation deck, Susan and the human team watched nervously as Joe seemed to retreat from his opponent. What is he doing? Alan asked. He's backing himself into a corner. Up there. Patricia studied the tactical display. The storm is intensifying directly above that peak. I think Joe is positioning himself deliberately. Ambassador Kragthal chuckled. Your warrior seeks high ground? A basic tactic that will fail against Vexicor's strength. Susan smiled slightly. Joe never does anything for just one reason, Ambassador. Back. In the arena, Joe reached the summit. Lightning struck a nearby peak, temporarily blinding both fighters with its brightness. The air crackled with electricity. Joe took a deep breath, centering himself as he'd been taught since childhood. Now was the time. Nowhere left to run, Vexicor said as he climbed the final slope to the summit. His metallic claws dug into the rock for support. I will make this quick, out of respect for your previous victories, Joe finally spoke. You have fought well, but you've missed something important. And what is that? the Draconian asked, pausing in curiosity. A true warrior adapts to their environment, Joe said, and makes it part of their strategy. With those words, Joe leaped high into the air, higher than should have been possible in the arena's gravity. The storm had created updrafts that he used to gain additional height. At the peak of his jump, lightning struck again, this time directly at Joe's position. The observers gasped in horror, thinking the human had been hit. But Joe had calculated his move perfectly. He twisted in midair, his body acting as a conductor to channel the lightning's energy. Rather than absorbing it, he redirected it, straight toward VexCore and his metal-enhanced armor. The lightning followed the path of least resistance, arcing from Joe's outstretched hand to the Draconian's metal-enhanced claws. VexCore roared, in pain as the electromagnetic pulse disrupted his nervous system. Joe landed gracefully as VexCore fell to his knees, temporarily paralyzed by the electromagnetic shock. The human approached carefully. "Impossible," VexCore gasped. "No being can control lightning." "I didn't control it," Joe explained. "I understood its nature and worked with it, not against it, just as I did with you." The Draconian champion struggled to rise but found his limbs unresponsive. "Finish it then," he growled. "Take your victory." Joe shook his head. "The match is over, but I won't harm a disabled opponent. That is not our way." He turned to the arena's monitoring systems and bowed, signaling his victory claim without inflicting unnecessary suffering. After a moment of stunned silence, the officiating system announced, "Victory by incapacitation. Earth advances to the final round." In the observation deck, the alien dignitaries erupted in heated discussion. Nothing like this had been seen in tournament history. A supposedly primitive species using elemental forces to defeat one of the galaxy's most fearsome warriors. Ambassador Cragthal turned to Susan, his reptilian features unable to hide his shock. How did your warrior know that electromagnetic disruption would affect draconian physiology?" Susan shrugged. "Maybe he didn't. Joe adapts to what he observes. He noticed the metal components in your champion's gear and found a way to use them against him." The ambassador narrowed his eyes. "There is more to your species than we understood." "That's what we've been trying to tell you," Susan replied. When Joe returned to the human quarters, he was greeted with cheers and disbelief from his teammates. "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen," Patricia exclaimed. "You used the lightning as a weapon." Joe shook his head. "Not as a weapon, as a tool, there's a difference." Alan clapped him on the shoulder. "Whatever you call it, you're in the finals now. Do you know who you'll face?" "The Galactic champion," Susan said, entering the room with a datapad. "A being known only as the Void Dancer. No one knows what species it is. It competes in a fully enclosed environmental suit. It's undefeated in 3 tournaments." Joe nodded, absorbing this information. "When is the final match?" "Tomorrow," Susan replied. "They've moved it up. Apparently the Galactic Council is taking a special interest in your performance." Later that evening, as Joe meditated in preparation for the final match, he was interrupted by a communication alert. The screen in his quarters activated to show an encrypted transmission from Earth. It was the director of the intelligence agency that had sponsored his inclusion in the delegation. "Nakamura," the director said, "your performance has exceeded all expectations. The diplomatic implications are enormous. Every major power in the galaxy is reassessing their view of humanity." Joe nodded but remained silent. "The final match is more than just a tournament victory," the director continued. "It's about humanity's place in the galactic community. The technological gifts offered to the tournament winner would advance Earth's development by centuries." "I understand the stakes," Joe said simply. "Good. But there's something else you should know about your final opponent." The director's expression grew serious. "Our sources indicate that the Void Dancer isn't a natural being at all. It's a synthetic construct, a combat robot designed by combining the most effective fighting techniques from across the galaxy." Joe raised an eyebrow. "Is that allowed in the tournament?" "Apparently there's no rule against it." The older species have been using technology for so long that the line between biological and artificial has blurred for them. Joe considered this new information. A machine would rely on programming and prediction algorithms much like the Andorian I defeated. Yes, but far more advanced. It learns and adapts during combat. The director leaned closer to the screen. This won't be like your previous matches. The Void Dancer has never shown the same fighting style twice. Neither have I, Joe replied calmly. After the transmission ended, Joe returned to his meditation with new focus. A machine opponent presented, both challenges and opportunities. It would be stronger, faster, and possibly immune to many of his techniques. But it would still be bound by programming, by patterns too deep to erase completely. He thought back to his training, to the ancient scrolls his family had preserved for generations. One passage seemed particularly relevant now. When facing an opponent who knows all techniques, use no technique. When facing an opponent who predicts all movements, move without intention. Empty your cup to fill it anew. As Joe prepared for sleep, he gazed out at the stars visible from his viewport. Tomorrow he would face the ultimate test of his training, not just for himself or Earth, but for the principle that sometimes the old ways still held wisdom that technology could not replicate. The final match would determine more than a tournament champion. It would show whether humanity's path was worthy of respect among the stars. The day of the final match arrived. The entire space station buzzed with excitement. Species from across 17 galaxies had gathered to witness the unexpected showdown. A human ninja versus the mysterious Void Dancer. The arena had been configured as a zero-gravity chamber with floating platforms and obstacles. This environment would test both fighters' ability to move and think in 3 dimensions. Joe entered wearing only his lightweight environmental suit and a small utility belt approved by the tournament officials. His opponent floated in from the opposite entrance. The Void Dancer lived up to its name, a sleek black form with no clear shape. Its environmental suit revealed nothing about the being inside. It moved with unnatural grace, seeming to glide rather than push against the floating platforms. In the observation deck, every seat was filled. The Galactic Council members themselves had arrived to witness the match. Susan and the human team watched nervously as Joe faced his final challenge. "Does he know what he's up against?" Alan whispered. Susan nodded. "He knows it's a machine, but knowing and defeating are 2 different things." The match signal sounded, and both competitors pushed off from their starting platforms. The Void Dancer moved with incredible speed, changing direction without touching any surface, a clear sign of advanced technology. Joe took a different approach. He used the floating obstacles strategically, always keeping something between himself and his opponent. He needed time to observe, to understand the patterns hidden in the machine's seemingly random movements. The Void Dancer attacked first, launching small projectiles from its suit. Joe twisted in zero gravity, avoiding them narrowly. One grazed, his arm tearing the fabric of his suit. A thin line of blood appeared. First blood to the machine. "Your human bleeds already," Ambassador Cragthal commented. "The Void Dancer has never lost." "Neither has Joe," Susan replied calmly. Back in the arena, Joe continued his defensive strategy. Each time the Void Dancer attacked, he responded differently, never establishing a pattern that could be predicted. Sometimes he dodged, sometimes he blocked, sometimes he used the floating platforms as shields. 10 minutes into the match, something changed. The Void Dancer paused, hovering in place. Its featureless mask seemed to study Joe with new interest. Then it spoke. The first time anyone had heard it communicate during a match. Analysis incomplete. Subject displays non-standard combat algorithms. Joe didn't reply. He had confirmed what he suspected. The machine was trying to analyze his fighting style to predict his moves. By constantly changing his responses, he had prevented it from forming a complete profile. The Void Dancer changed tactics, moving to cut off Joe's access to the floating platforms. Without these anchor points, he would be helpless in zero gravity, while the machine could maneuver freely using its internal propulsion systems. Joe allowed himself to be cornered against a large platform. The Void Dancer approached, sensing victory. Just as it came within striking distance, Joe pushed hard against the platform, launching himself directly at his opponent. The machine hadn't predicted such a reckless move and couldn't react in time. Joe collided with the Void Dancer, grabbing onto its smooth surface. His fingers found small seams in the armor, maintenance access points. The machine spun wildly, trying to dislodge him, but Joe held firm. From his utility belt, he removed a small tool and inserted it into one of the seams. "What is he doing?" General Zor asked, leaning forward. Patricia smiled. Before he was a ninja, Joe was also an engineer. He's finding the machine's reset switch. The Void Dancer's movements became more erratic as Joe worked. A panel opened on its back, revealing complex circuitry. Joe reached inside and disconnected something. Immediately, the machine's propulsion systems failed. Both fighters began drifting, freely in the zero-gravity environment. "Clever," Ambassador Kragthal admitted. "He's neutralized its advantage." Now both competitors were equally affected by zero gravity. The Void Dancer still had its enhanced strength and combat programming, but without its thrusters it could no longer maneuver freely. Joe pushed away from the disabled machine, using the momentum to reach a nearby platform. The Void Dancer drifted helplessly for a moment, before activating backup systems. Its movements were now less fluid, more mechanical. Joe had disrupted its main control systems, forcing it to rely on simpler backup programming. The machine launched itself toward Joe, calculatingly using the rebound from a platform to gain speed. Joe waited until the last possible moment, then moved aside. The Void Dancer shot past him, unable to change direction. Joe caught its leg as it passed, using its momentum to swing himself around. He delivered a precise strike to another access panel, this one located on the machine's chest. The panel opened, revealing a glowing power core. Joe didn't damage it. That might have been dangerous for everyone in the arena. Instead, he pressed a sequence of controls surrounding the core. The glow dimmed, and the Void Dancer's limbs locked in place. System override initiated. Safe mode activated, the machine announced in a flat voice. It was still functional but could no longer fight. Joe pushed gently away from his immobilized opponent and signaled to the tournament officials. After a moment of stunned silence, the announcement came. "Victory to Earth. The tournament is concluded." The observation deck erupted in a mixture of cheers, protests, and amazed conversations. Nothing like this had been seen in tournament history. A supposedly primitive human had defeated the most advanced combat system in the galaxy, using nothing but training, observation, and quick thinking. Susan was immediately surrounded by alien dignitaries, all demanding explanations and information. How had Earth produced such a warrior? What other secrets did humans possess? Joe returned to the preparation room where his team waited. They greeted him with cheers and congratulations, but he remained humble. "You did it," Alan exclaimed. "You actually beat that thing." Joe shook his head slightly. "I didn't beat it with strength or speed. I simply found its weakness." "Which was what?" Patricia asked. "Predictability," Joe replied. "Even the most advanced machine follows programming. It couldn't understand a fighting style based on spontaneity and adaptation. My ancestors developed these techniques against human opponents, but the principles work against any predictive system." Later that day, the Galactic Council formally presented Joe with the tournament trophy. More importantly, they offered Earth an accelerated membership in the Galactic Federation and access to technologies that would advance human civilization by centuries. Ambassador Kragthal approached Joe during the ceremony. "Your victory has taught us all a valuable lesson, human. Technology alone does not make a superior warrior." Joe nodded. "Or a superior civilization. Each path has its wisdom." As the Earth delegation prepared to return home with their new diplomatic status and technological gifts, Susan found Joe looking out at the stars once more. "You've changed humanity's future," she said. "We're no longer seen as primitive." "That was never the goal," Joe replied. "The goal was to show that there are many paths to advancement. Some through technology, some through tradition. The best path combines both. Susan smiled. Well, no one is mocking Earth's skills anymore. Joe allowed himself a small smile in return, and that is victory enough. As their ship departed for Earth, carrying treaties and technological gifts that would transform human civilization, Joe reflected on the journey ahead. Humanity would now advance rapidly with alien technology, but he hoped they wouldn't forget the lesson of the tournament, that sometimes ancient wisdom could overcome even the most advanced technology. The galaxy had mocked Earth's skills until they witnessed the power of human adaptation. They wouldn't make that mistake again.